Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from Gone Legends. In today's video, we'll be highlighting American celebrities who passed away today, and in recent days, along with other notable individuals from around the world. Before we proceed, we kindly ask for your support. If you find these tributes meaningful, please take a moment to like this video. It truly means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. And now, let's begin. 1.
Lauren Ann Chapin. On February 24, 2026, Lauren Ann Chapin passed away at the age of 80, closing the final chapter of a life that had once begun under the bright studio lights of Hollywood, though the exact cause of her death was not widely detailed in public reports. Her passing marked the quiet farewell of one of television's earliest child stars. Born on May 23, 1945 in Los Angeles, California, Lauren grew up in the very heart of the entertainment industry. She became a household name as Kitten Anderson on the beloved American television series Father Knows Best, a role she began playing as a young child. Her natural innocence and warmth won the hearts of millions across the United States during the golden age of television. Over 6 seasons, she earned multiple Junior Emmy Awards, becoming one of the most recognized child actresses of her time. Yet life beyond fame was not always easy. After the show ended, Lauren faced personal struggles and challenges adjusting to adulthood outside the spotlight. In later years, she embraced faith and spirituality, becoming an ordained evangelist and dedicating herself to ministry and inspirational speaking. Her life became a story not only of early success, but of resilience, redemption, and personal transformation. Lauren Chapin's legacy lives on in the timeless episodes that continue to remind audiences of a gentler era in television history.
2.
Irina Borisovna Shevchuk. On February 24, 2026, Irina Borisovna Shevchuk died at the age of 74 after battling brain lymphoma, a devastating illness that ultimately claimed her life. Born on October 6, 1951, in Murmansk, Russia, Irina grew up in the far north before pursuing her passion for acting at the prestigious VGIG film school in Moscow. She rose to prominence in the Soviet Union through powerful, emotionally layered performances that captured both vulnerability and strength. Her breakthrough came with the 1972 war drama The Dons, Here Are Quiet, a film that became a cultural landmark and introduced her to international audiences. She later appeared in White Bim Black Ear and numerous other respected productions, becoming a distinguished figure in Russian cinema. Irina was admired not only for her talent but for the sincerity she brought to every role, portraying women of depth and dignity during a transformative era in Soviet storytelling. Throughout her career, she remained committed to her craft, contributing to both film and television for decades. Her performances carried the emotional weight of history and human endurance. Her work continues to preserve her presence for future generations.
3.
Robert Edward Bobby Douglas. On February 23, 2026, Robert Edward Bobby Douglas passed away at the age of 83, leaving behind a towering legacy in American wrestling. Though specific medical details regarding his cause of death were not widely detailed, his passing deeply affected the world of sports. Born on August 26, 1942 in Vail, Ohio, Bobby grew up with determination and discipline that would later define his athletic career. He rose through collegiate wrestling ranks to represent the United States at the 1964 and 1968 Olympic Games. His achievements included medals at the World Championships, establishing himself as one of the nation's elite competitors. Yet perhaps his most lasting contribution came after his competitive years, when he became a legendary coach. Leading collegiate programs and mentoring future champions, Bobby shaped generations of wrestlers with his technical knowledge and motivational leadership. His influence extended far beyond wins and losses, instilling character and perseverance in countless athletes.
4.
Monty Rock III. On February 23, 2036, Monty Rock III died at the age of 86 due to complications from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. Born Joseph Montanez Jr. on May 29, 1939, in the Bronx, New York City, He became one of the most flamboyant and unforgettable personalities of the disco era in the United States. Monty first gained attention as a charismatic television personality, appearing on talk shows where his bold style captivated audiences. During the 1970s, he cemented his place in pop culture history as the frontman of discotheques and his sexolettes, releasing dance hits like Get Dancin' and I Wanna Dance With You. His vibrant costumes and theatrical performances made him a symbol of rhythm, freedom, and self-expression. With his passing, the world lost a dazzling entertainer whose legacy remains woven into the glittering spirit of disco history.
5.
Birgitta Andersson. On February 22, 2026, Birgitta Andersson passed away at the age of 92. While the exact medical cause of her death was not widely reported, her passing marked the end of an extraordinary era in Swedish entertainment. Born Ulla Birgitta Helena Andersson on April 20, 1933, in Mariestad, Sweden, she grew up during a time of social change that would later shape her artistic voice. She rose to prominence as a comedic actress, becoming one of Sweden's most beloved performers through her work in theater, film, and television. Birgitta was especially known for her collaborations with the legendary comedy duo Hasse and Taj, where her impeccable timing and expressive personality captivated audiences. She also became a cherished figure for families through her role as Teskidsgumman in the 1967 Swedish Christmas television series, a character that became part of national tradition. Throughout her long career, she balanced humor with warmth, creating performances that resonated across generations. Her legacy remains deeply rooted in Scandinavian culture, where her laughter and vibrant spirit continue to echo.
6.
Raymond Bouchard. On February 21, 2026, Raymond Bouchard passed away at the age of 80. Although detailed medical information about his cause of death was not widely publicized, his loss was profoundly felt in Canada's artistic community. Born on March 7, 1945, in Lévis, Quebec, Canada, Raymond built a distinguished career as an actor in both film and theater. He became widely recognized for his role in the 2003 film Seducing Dr. Louis, Le Grand Seduction, where his heartfelt performance showcased the humor and resilience of rural Quebec life. Over the years, he appeared in numerous acclaimed productions and earned prestigious awards, including the Prix Gémeaux for his television work. Raymond was also deeply involved in theater, contributing to the development of Canadian stage arts. His performances were marked by sincerity and depth, reflecting the cultural identity of Quebec. With his passing, Canada lost a respected storyteller whose voice shaped its cinematic and theatrical heritage.
7.
Rondale Deshawn Moore. On February 21, 2026, Rondale Deshawn Moore died at the age of 25. Public reports did not widely detail the exact cause of his death, but his sudden passing shocked the world of American football. Born on June 9, 2000, in New Albany, Indiana, Rondale emerged as one of the most electrifying young talents in college football. He gained national recognition at Purdue University, where his speed, agility, and versatility made him a standout player and a consensus All-American as a freshman. His dynamic playing style drew attention from the National Football League, where he continued his professional career. Though still early in his journey, Rondale had already inspired many young athletes with his determination and explosive athletic ability. His life, filled with promise and potential, was tragically cut short. His legacy remains in the highlight reels, the records he set, and the inspiration he provided to aspiring football players across the United States.
8.
Angela Luce. On February 20, 2026, Angela Luce passed away at the age of 87 due to heart failure. Born Angela Savino on December 3, 1938, in Naples, Italy, she became one of the most cherished figures in Italian cinema and music. Growing up in the culturally rich city of Naples, she developed a deep connection to traditional Neapolitan song and performance. Angela appeared in more than 60 films throughout her career, collaborating with some of Italy's most respected directors and actors. In addition to acting, she was an accomplished singer, bringing emotional depth and authenticity to classic Italian songs. Her performances reflected the soul of Naples, passionate, expressive, and deeply human. Over decades, she remained a respected presence in theater, film, and music, contributing significantly to Italian cultural heritage. With her passing, Italy lost not only an actress and singer, but a living symbol of Neapolitan artistic tradition whose voice and performances continue to resonate.
9.
On March 27, 2022, beneath the glittering lights of the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, the world witnessed a moment that would forever alter the legacy of Willard Carroll Smith Jr., born September 25, 1968, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For decades, he had been one of the most admired entertainers on the planet. A man whose smile felt effortless, whose charisma seemed natural, whose success appeared unstoppable. That night, he was seated among Hollywood royalty, moments away from receiving the Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Richard Williams in King Richard. It was meant to be the crowning achievement of a 30-year journey. Instead, it became the most controversial night of his life. A joke was delivered from the stage. Cameras cut to Will Smith. He laughed at first. Then something changed in his eyes. Something tightened. Something unresolved rose to the surface. Within seconds, he stood up, walked onto the stage, and struck comedian Chris Rock in front of millions of viewers worldwide. The sound of that slap echoed far beyond the theater walls. The room fell silent. The audience froze. Social media exploded. History shifted. Less than an hour later, he stood again to accept his Oscar, tears in his eyes, speaking about love, protection, and being a vessel for care. But the celebration felt fractured. Within days, he resigned from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and received a 10-year ban from attending Academy events. Film projects were paused. Public opinion divided sharply. The man once known as the most likable star in Hollywood was suddenly at the center of a global storm. But that moment did not begin on that stage. It began decades earlier, in a home where a young boy learned that strength meant survival and silence meant safety. Long before the fame, before the music, before the red carpets, there was West Philadelphia in the 1970s. Will Smith grew up in a middle-class household with structure and expectation. His father, Willard Carroll Smith Sr., was a refrigeration engineer and a U.S. Air Force veteran. His mother, Caroline Bright, was a school board administrator who valued discipline and education. To neighbors, they were respectable, stable, solid. But inside the house, tension sometimes lived in the shadows. Will would later speak openly about witnessing his father physically assault his mother. One memory etched itself permanently into his psyche, seeing his father hit his mother so violently that she collapsed. He was just a child, frozen, powerless, watching. That moment created a fracture inside him. He carried the belief that he had failed to protect her, that he was weak, that he had not been strong enough. For the rest of his life, he would chase strength, success, and perfection, trying to outrun that childhood feeling of helplessness. He discovered something early. Humor diffused danger. If he could make people laugh, maybe conflict would soften. If he became charming enough, entertaining enough, useful enough, perhaps the storms would never arrive. So he became the class clown, the charismatic peacemaker, the boy who could win over any room. But behind the smile was a vow he never spoke out loud: never feel powerless again. By the late 1980s, that same boy had transformed into the Fresh Prince, one half of DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. His rise in hip-hop was swift and unprecedented. Alongside Jeffrey Towns, known as DJ Jazzy Jeff, he delivered playful, story-driven rap that stood apart from the aggression dominating the genre. Songs like Parents Just Don't Understand and Summertime made him relatable to suburban teenagers and inner-city youth alike. In 1989, he won the first Grammy Award ever presented in the rap category. He was barely in his 20s. Money flowed quickly. Fame followed. Success seemed guaranteed. But financial mismanagement and unpaid taxes quietly grew into catastrophe. The Internal Revenue Service eventually claimed millions in unpaid taxes. Bank accounts were drained. Luxury cars were repossessed. Earnings were seized. At only 21 years old, Will Smith faced near financial ruin. The humiliation was devastating. The image of effortless success shattered behind closed doors. For a young man obsessed with proving his strength, it felt like confirmation of his deepest fear, that everything could disappear in an instant, that he could lose control again. Salvation came unexpectedly through television. Legendary producer Quincy Jones saw potential in the struggling rapper and offered him an audition for a sitcom. The result was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which premiered in 1990. The premise was simple. A street-smart teenager from West Philadelphia moves in with wealthy relatives in California. But the impact was enormous. Will Smith's natural timing, charm, and vulnerability turned the show into a cultural landmark. It ran for 6 seasons and introduced him to a global audience. Yet even during the laughter, pressure intensified. He was no longer just an artist. He was a brand. Studios saw him as dependable, bankable, safe. Every performance had to deliver. Every appearance had to maintain the image. Failure was not an option. When films like Independence Day, Men in Black, and Bad Boys dominated the box office, he became the definition of a blockbuster star. But when projects like Wild Wild West faltered, criticism cut deeper than he admitted. He famously turned down the role of Neo in The Matrix, a decision that haunted him when the film became iconic. Each misstep reinforced his internal demand for perfection. Each criticism stirred the old childhood fear of not being enough. As his career soared, his personal life unfolded under relentless public scrutiny. He married actress Jada Pinkett Smith in 1997, and together they became one of Hollywood's most influential couples. They raised 3 children, Trey, Jaden, and Willow, and built an empire that extended beyond film into production, philanthropy, and media. But the spotlight never dimmed. In 2020, during a widely viewed episode of Red Table Talk, Jada publicly discussed an entanglement with singer August Alsina during a period of separation in their marriage. Will sat across from her during that conversation, composed but visibly wounded. The internet turned his expression into memes. Late-night comedians made jokes. Social media ridiculed him. For a man whose childhood trauma centered on failing to protect someone he loved, the public humiliation felt personal. He maintained grace outwardly, but internally the pressure accumulated. By the time he stepped onto that Oscar stage in 2022, decades of unresolved emotion converged in a single instant. The joke, directed at his wife, referenced her shaved head, a sensitive subject due to her struggle with alopecia. To the audience, it was another comedic moment in a long ceremony. To Will Smith, it triggered something much older. Protection, shame, helplessness, public ridicule, childhood memory. Years of bottled pressure collided in one irreversible action. The slap was not merely about a joke. It was the eruption of a man who had spent a lifetime trying to be invulnerable. Afterward came apology, reflection, therapy, and silence. He released public statements expressing remorse. He stepped away from the spotlight. For the first time in his career, he was not the hero of the narrative. He was a flawed human being confronting himself in front of the world, yet to reduce his life to that single moment would be incomplete. Will Smith is not defined by death or scandal, but by resilience. He is an American actor, rapper, and producer who has lived through financial collapse, childhood trauma, public humiliation, professional triumph, and global adoration. He has sold millions of records, starred in some of the highest-grossing films of all time, and won an Academy Award. He has influenced generations of artists who saw in him the possibility of crossing genres and redefining identity. But before the redemption, before the healing, before the comeback, there was darkness. And it is from that darkness that the rest of his story rises. Before the world knew him as a global superstar, before the red carpets and billion-dollar box offices, Before controversy and redemption, there was a teenager in West Philadelphia who believed that words could build a future. Willard Carroll Smith Jr. was not born into poverty, nor into privilege, but into a disciplined household that valued structure and ambition. Yet what separated him from others in his neighborhood was not simply talent. It was hunger. A quiet, relentless hunger to become unforgettable. As hip-hop culture began spreading across city blocks in the late 1970s and early 1980s, it was more than music to young Will. It was possibility. It was rhythm as identity. It was storytelling as survival. He met Jeffrey Towns at a house party by chance. Towns, already known locally as DJ Jazzy Jeff, was spinning records when his hype man failed to show up. Will stepped in, no rehearsal, no preparation, just instinct. Words flowed effortlessly. The chemistry was immediate. That night marked the beginning of a partnership that would alter both of their lives. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince became more than a duo. They became a bridge between street culture and mainstream America. While much of early rap reflected harsh urban realities, Will chose a different lane. His rhymes were humorous, clean, narrative-driven. He told stories about teenage embarrassment, parental misunderstandings, summer romances, and everyday life. It made him accessible, relatable, safe for radio. By 1986, they released their debut album, Rock the House. It achieved gold status. Suddenly, the teenager from West Philly was touring nationally. Fame came quickly, and with it came money, attention, and validation. In 1988, their album, He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper, went triple platinum. Then came 1989. The Grammy Awards introduced a new category, Best Rap Performance. DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince won for Parents Just Don't Understand. It was historic. Hip-hop had officially been acknowledged by the establishment, and Will Smith stood at the podium representing a genre that was still fighting for legitimacy. He was only 20 years old, but fame in youth can distort perspective. The money felt endless. The lifestyle felt permanent. He purchased cars, jewelry, and indulgences that reflected his rapid ascent. Yet behind the scenes, financial oversight was minimal. Taxes were unpaid. Contracts were misunderstood. When the IRS intervened, they did not negotiate gently. Millions of dollars were owed. The government claimed most of his earnings. His possessions were seized. The success he had celebrated publicly collapsed privately. For a young man who equated achievement with safety, the fall was humiliating. It felt like failure. It felt like exposure. It felt like being powerless again. At that crossroads when embarrassment threatened to define him, opportunity knocked in the most unexpected form. A birthday party performance placed him in the presence of Quincy Jones, one of the most powerful producers in entertainment. Jones saw beyond the rapper. He saw personality, timing, screen presence. Within weeks, an audition was arranged for a sitcom concept about a streetwise teenager adjusting to life in a wealthy California household. Will had no formal acting experience, no training, no resume. But he had charisma that cameras love. He memorized the entire script before the audition, even the other actors' lines, fearing he would fail if he missed a single word. That obsessive preparation reflected his deeper fear of inadequacy. He refused to look unready. The audition impressed executives instantly. The show was greenlit. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air premiered in September 1990. From its first episode, the series resonated with audiences. It was funny, vibrant, culturally relevant. But beneath the comedy were serious themes: race, class, identity, fatherhood, belonging. Will Smith, playing a fictionalized version of himself, grew before viewers' eyes. One of the most powerful episodes involved his character's estranged father returning briefly, only to leave again. In that climactic scene, as Will's character broke down asking why his father did not want him, the tears felt authentic because they were. The emotional release tapped into his real childhood wounds. Audiences saw not just a comedian, but an actor capable of raw vulnerability. The sitcom ran for 6 successful seasons until 1996, transforming him from rapper to household name. Yet even as the show thrived, Will Smith was already planning his next reinvention. Television success was not enough. He wanted cinema. He wanted global reach. In 1995, he starred alongside Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys. The action comedy showcased his swagger, humor, and emerging physical presence. It was gritty and energetic, proving he could lead a film. The following year, Independence Day arrived, playing Captain Stephen Hiller, a fighter pilot defending Earth from alien invasion. Smith combined confidence and comedic timing with heroic gravitas. The film grossed over $800 million worldwide. It was a cultural event. Suddenly, Will Smith was not just famous. He was international. Then came Men in Black in 1997. As Agent J recruited into a secret organization policing extraterrestrials, he delivered a performance that balanced sarcasm, charm, and wonder. The chemistry with Tommy Lee Jones anchored the film, and its massive success cemented Smith as a bankable star. Throughout the late 1990s, a pattern emerged. July releases starring Will Smith became synonymous with summer blockbusters. Audiences trusted him. Studios relied on him. His name alone carried weight. But the climb was never without pressure. Each new role carried expectation to surpass the last. When Wild Wild West underperformed critically and commercially in 1999, criticism was sharp. He privately questioned his instincts. He wondered if he had chosen spectacle over substance. He famously declined the role of Neo in The Matrix because he did not fully understand the pitch. Watching the film become revolutionary intensified his self-doubt. These moments, though less visible to the public, reinforced his obsession with controlling outcomes. As the new millennium began, Will Smith faced a pivotal decision. Would he remain the charismatic action star or pursue dramatic legitimacy? In 2001, he chose transformation. Portraying Muhammad Ali in Ali required physical discipline, intense study, and emotional depth. He immersed himself completely, gaining muscle and adopting Ali's cadence and mannerisms. Critics praised his performance. He received his first Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. For the first time, Hollywood recognized him not merely as a box office draw, but as a serious actor. The boy from West Philadelphia had now conquered music, television, and blockbuster cinema. Yet beneath the triumph, the internal narrative remained unchanged. Success meant safety. Applause meant worthiness. Control meant protection. And as his fame expanded globally, so too did the invisible weight he carried. The rise of Will Smith was meteoric, but meteors burn intensely as they travel. The higher he climbed, the greater the expectations. And soon he would discover that sustaining superstardom required more than talent. It required endurance. By the early 2000s, Will Smith was no longer simply a star. He was a guarantee. His name above a movie title meant international sales, record-breaking openings, and global appeal that transcended language and borders. Studios built release calendars around him. Marketing campaigns revolved around his smile. Entire summer seasons depended on his presence. But there is a silent cost to becoming dependable at that scale. When the world expects you to win every time, failure becomes terrifying. After the acclaim of Ali in 2001 and his first Academy Award nomination, Smith found himself standing at a creative crossroads. He had proven he could carry action films. He had proven he could deliver dramatic performances. Yet internally, the pressure only intensified. He did not merely want to succeed. He wanted to dominate. He once admitted that he studied the box office patterns of other stars obsessively. He mapped out release strategies. He calculated international markets. He wanted to understand fame like a science. To him, superstardom was not accidental. It was engineered. This mindset drove him into projects that blended spectacle with emotion. In 2004, he starred in I, Robot, stepping into a futuristic world where artificial intelligence threatens humanity. The film performed strongly, reinforcing his reliability. Then came Hitch in 2005, a romantic comedy that showcased another dimension of his charisma. As a professional dating consultant who secretly struggled with vulnerability, Smith allowed audiences to see gentler edges. The film was a commercial triumph, proving that he could dominate not only action, but romance as well. Yet behind the success, something more fragile was forming. The identity of Invincible movie star became both armor and cage. Every public appearance required charm. Every interview required humor. He was expected to be endlessly positive, endlessly likable. Hollywood does not easily forgive inconsistency. And so he learned to suppress doubt, to manage perception, to present perfection. In 2006, he delivered one of the most emotionally resonant performances of his career in The Pursuit of Happiness, based on the true story of Chris Gardner, a struggling salesman who becomes homeless while raising his young son. The film demanded vulnerability rather than swagger. Acting alongside his real-life son Jaden Smith, Will portrayed desperation without melodrama. There is a scene where he locks himself in a public restroom with his child, pretending it is a temporary adventure while silently breaking down. The quiet tears in that moment were not exaggerated. They were restrained, controlled, painfully real. The performance earned him his second Academy Award nomination. Critics praised him. Audiences wept with him. But even in triumph, the internal voice did not quiet. Success fed expectation. Expectation fed anxiety. And anxiety demanded constant achievement. In 2007, he starred in I Am Legend, carrying nearly the entire film alone as a scientist surviving in a post-apocalyptic world. The imagery of isolation was striking. One man walking through abandoned streets, speaking only to mannequins and a dog. Symbolically, it mirrored something personal. Superstardom can be isolating. When everyone sees you as larger than life, few see the life behind the image. Then came a series of creative risks. 7 Pounds in 2008 was darker, introspective, morally complex. It divided critics, but demonstrated his willingness to explore heavy emotional territory. Yet the industry shifted. New franchises emerged. Younger stars rose. The market evolved toward interconnected universes and superhero spectacles. Smith's once flawless box office streak began to show cracks. Films like After Earth in 2013, which he developed as a father-son vehicle for Jaden, underperformed and faced harsh reviews. For someone who equated public success with personal worth, criticism felt personal. The father-son dynamic added another layer of vulnerability. Will had always spoken about wanting to be a better father than his own. He wanted his children to feel empowered, fearless, self-expressive. But fame complicated parenting. Jaden and Willow grew up under intense scrutiny. Their artistic choices became headlines. Interviews were dissected. Social media amplified every misstep. As a father and a public figure, Smith felt responsible for both protecting and promoting them. That dual role created tension. Was he guiding them or projecting his own ambitions? Was he shielding them or exposing them? Meanwhile, his marriage to Jada Pinkett Smith remained under constant public observation. They were not a conventional Hollywood couple. They spoke openly about independence, self-discovery, and redefining partnership. For some, their transparency was refreshing. For others, it was confusing. Rumors swirled persistently. Tabloids speculated relentlessly. Maintaining dignity amid speculation required emotional stamina. In 2016, he entered the world of comic book cinema with Suicide Squad, portraying the sharpshooting assassin Deadshot. The film was commercially successful but critically divisive. Again, the pattern repeated, applause mixed with critique. For an artist driven by validation, mixed reactions could feel like rejection. He later admitted that chasing massive box office numbers had begun to exhaust him. The thrill of opening weekend victories no longer satisfied the deeper questions he carried about meaning and purpose. In quieter moments, he began reflecting on his identity beyond performance. What remained if the applause stopped? Who was he without the brand of Will Smith? In interviews and later in his memoir, he described realizing that much of his life had been fueled by fear. of inadequacy, fear of failure, fear of not being strong enough to protect those he loved. That fear had propelled him to extraordinary heights, but it had also prevented him from resting. The world still saw the polished movie star, the charming talk show guest, the confident entertainer, but internally he was confronting something more unsettling, the possibility that perfection was impossible, that control was an illusion, that strength did not mean suppressing pain. These realizations would deepen in the years ahead, especially as personal revelations unfolded publicly. The image of invincibility would erode further, and the man who once believed success could shield him from vulnerability would face the truth that no level of fame can silence unresolved emotion. The rise had been spectacular, the dominance undeniable, but sustaining that height required constant emotional negotiation. And as the weight grew heavier, cracks began to form beneath the surface. For years, Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith represented something powerful in Hollywood. They were not simply a celebrity couple. They were a brand of unity, ambition, and unapologetic individuality. Married in 1997, they built a life that appeared bold and unbreakable. They spoke about partnership as growth, about freedom within commitment, about redefining what marriage could look like in a modern world. To some, they were aspirational. To others, mysterious. But behind the red carpets and coordinated interviews lived a relationship as complex and human as any other, only magnified under the harshest spotlight imaginable. Will often described meeting Jada as transformative. She was strong where he felt uncertain, independent where he sometimes sought approval. She challenged him intellectually and emotionally. Their bond felt electric, intense, deeply connected. Together they raised 3 children, Trey from his previous marriage and Jaden and Willow from their union. They built production companies, they supported philanthropic causes. They presented themselves as partners in evolution rather than traditional roles. But evolution is rarely smooth. It demands discomfort, it exposes cracks, and when those cracks appear in private, most couples can navigate them quietly. When they appear in public, the world becomes judge and jury. In 2020, during a global pandemic when the world itself felt fragile, an episode of Jada's talk show Red Table Talk aired that would send shockwaves through their carefully constructed narrative. Rumors had circulated for years about the nature of their marriage. Speculation about separations, about unconventional agreements, about emotional distance. On that day, they chose to address it openly. Jada acknowledged that during a period when she and Will were separated, she had entered into a relationship with singer August Alsina. She described it as an entanglement. The word became viral instantly. Across social media, clips of the conversation spread rapidly. Will sat beside her at the red table, listening quietly as she explained the timeline and context. His expression was controlled, but the weight in his eyes was unmistakable. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He did not perform anger. Instead, he absorbed the revelation publicly, nodding, asking questions, attempting to frame the situation within their narrative of growth and honesty. But the internet does not process nuance gently. Memes flooded timelines within minutes. Screenshots of his face were edited, captioned, mocked. Late-night hosts turned the word entanglement into punchlines. Strangers debated his masculinity. Comment sections dissected his dignity. For a man whose deepest childhood wound centered on failing to protect someone he loved, the humiliation felt layered. It was not simply about infidelity. It was about exposure, about vulnerability displayed without armor, about being perceived as weak in a culture that equates stoicism with strength. Will later admitted that their marriage had faced years of turbulence long before that episode aired. Success had created distance. Personal growth had led them down different internal paths. There were periods of separation, moments of confusion, attempts at redefining commitment. But what might have remained private in another life became public spectacle in his. And yet, instead of retreating entirely, he chose transparency. he spoke about the importance of honesty, even when painful. He acknowledged that love is not static, that long-term partnership requires uncomfortable conversations. He insisted that what the world saw as scandal was, in his eyes, part of a healing process. Still, perception carries power, and perception began to shift. The invincible action hero image softened into something more vulnerable. Some admired his composure. Others ridiculed his restraint. The duality was relentless. Every interview after that carried unspoken tension. Every joke about relationships felt sharper. The psychological impact of sustained public ridicule can be profound. When millions analyze your private pain, it does not disappear when cameras turn off. It lingers. It echoes. It resurfaces in quiet moments. Will had spent a lifetime constructing an image of control and charisma. Now, control seemed fractured. The narrative was no longer entirely his to shape. In interviews following the incident, he spoke candidly about realizing that much of his identity had been built around pleasing others, around performing happiness, around ensuring that those around him felt safe, entertained, protected. But when personal vulnerability became viral content, he confronted an uncomfortable truth: he could not manage everyone's perception. He could not outcharm humiliation. He could not silence the noise through success alone. At the same time, his professional life continued moving forward. He launched a successful YouTube channel that revealed behind-the-scenes glimpses of his life. He embraced social media with humor and creativity, reinventing himself for a digital generation. He released content that felt spontaneous, playful, human. It seemed like a resurgence, a reclaiming of narrative. But emotional undercurrents do not dissolve through performance. The unresolved tension surrounding his marriage, combined with decades of internalized pressure, quietly accumulated. To the public, he appeared resilient. To himself, he was confronting deeper questions about identity, ego, and fear. The entanglement episode was more than gossip. It was a crack in the armor of perfection. It exposed the fragile space between image and reality. It reminded the world that even those who seem untouchable are navigating private storms. And as time moved forward, those unresolved storms would collide with a moment that would define his legacy in ways no one anticipated. By the time the 94th Academy Awards arrived in March 2022, Will Smith had been living inside a pressure chamber for years. The public humiliation of his marriage discussions had not fully faded. The memes still lingered online. Jokes still resurfaced. His identity had quietly shifted in the cultural conversation from untouchable superstar to vulnerable punchline. And yet, professionally, he was experiencing one of the most triumphant seasons of his career. His portrayal of Richard Williams in King Richard had earned widespread critical acclaim. The role required discipline, restraint, and emotional maturity. As the determined father of Venus and Serena Williams, Smith embodied protective intensity with layered humanity. Many critics called it the performance of his career. Award nominations followed steadily. The Oscars felt inevitable, but beneath that professional victory was an emotional crossroads. In interviews leading up to the ceremony, Smith spoke about surrendering control, about embracing vulnerability, about becoming a vessel for love rather than dominance. He described letting go of the need to be perfect, yet internal transformation is rarely linear. Old wounds do not vanish overnight. When he walked into the Dolby Theater that evening, he carried anticipation, pride, and perhaps unspoken tension. The ceremony unfolded like any other laughter. Tributes, predictable rhythms. Then, Chris Rock stepped onto the stage to present an award. Rock, known for sharp humor, delivered a joke referencing Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to the character from G.I. Jane. To some in the room, it was a quick laugh. To millions watching at home, it seemed like routine banter. But context changes impact. Jada had publicly discussed her struggle with alopecia, an autoimmune condition causing hair loss. Her shaved head was not a fashion statement alone. It was vulnerability worn openly. At first, cameras captured Will laughing. Then they cut to Jada. Her expression was tight, unamused. In that instant, something recalibrated inside him. He stood up, he walked onto the stage, and he struck Chris Rock. The moment unfolded in seconds, yet it felt suspended in time. The slap itself was not violent in a cinematic sense. It was quick, sharp, unrehearsed. But its symbolism was thunderous. Returning to his seat, he shouted twice for Rock to keep his wife's name out of his mouth. His voice cracked with intensity. Psychologists later analyzed the event from multiple angles. Some described it as a fight response triggered by perceived threat. Others pointed to accumulated stress, decades of striving, public scrutiny, unresolved childhood trauma around protection. When you grow up witnessing violence against someone you love and feeling powerless to intervene, that memory does not disappear. It embeds itself in your nervous system. In moments of perceived danger or humiliation, the body can react before logic intervenes. For Will Smith, the stage may have transformed symbolically into something older than an award ceremony. It may have felt like a moment demanding action, strength, protection. The boy who once froze in fear might have been replaced by a man determined never to freeze again. But protection through aggression carries consequence. The theater remained stunned. Chris Rock, maintaining composure, continued presenting the award. Social media erupted within minutes. Headlines formed in real time. The ceremony attempted to move forward, but the atmosphere had shifted irreversibly. Less than an hour later, Smith won the Academy Award for Best Actor. When he returned to the stage, the applause felt complicated. In his acceptance speech, he apologized to the Academy and fellow nominees, though not directly to Rock at that moment. He spoke about love making people do crazy things. He compared himself to Richard Williams, fiercely defending family. Tears streamed down his face. To viewers, the speech was layered, part triumph, part justification, part emotional overflow. The days that followed were relentless. Public opinion fractured sharply. Some defended him, framing the slap as an emotional mistake born from love. Others condemned the action as assault, arguing that violence has no place in professional spaces. Celebrities weighed in. News outlets debated endlessly. The incident became cultural shorthand for emotional breakdown. Within days, Smith issued a written apology directly to Chris Rock, acknowledging that his behavior was unacceptable and inexcusable. He described his reaction as emotional and stated that he was embarrassed by his actions. Shortly afterward, he resigned from the Academy voluntarily. The Academy imposed a 10-year ban preventing him from attending its events. Several film projects were delayed or quietly shelved. For the first time in his career, Will Smith experienced a universal narrative he could not fully control. He had built decades of goodwill, yet one moment overshadowed countless achievements. The weight of perfection he had carried for years collapsed into public fallibility. But perhaps the most significant consequence was internal. He later described entering a period of deep self-examination. Therapy intensified. Reflection deepened. He asked himself difficult questions. Why did that moment trigger such intensity? What fear was activated? What part of his past resurfaced? In confronting those questions, he revisited childhood memories of powerlessness. He recognized that much of his ambition had been fueled by a desire to never feel weak again. He understood that his public image as endlessly charming had sometimes prevented authentic emotional processing. The slap was not premeditated. It was reactive, and reactions often reveal what remains unresolved. The world debated morality. Commentators debated accountability. But privately, he confronted identity. Was he the image he had crafted? Was he the flawed human who acted impulsively? Or was he both? History often remembers people by singular moments. Yet human beings are not singular. They are layered, contradictory, evolving. The Oscar night eruption did not erase his accomplishments, nor did it excuse his behavior. It complicated his legacy. It forced a reckoning, and in that reckoning, A new chapter quietly began, one not defined by applause, but by introspection. After the headlines slowed and the viral clip stopped replaying on every screen, a different kind of moment began for Will Smith. It was not loud. It was not televised. There were no flashing cameras or orchestral scores. There was only silence. And for a man who had lived most of his life in performance mode, silence can be the most confronting space of all. In the immediate aftermath of the Oscars, the world seemed to move with brutal speed. Commentators dissected his character. Analysts replayed the footage frame by frame. Comedians built entire monologues around the incident. Social media reduced decades of achievement into a single freeze frame. Yet behind the public conversation, there was a human being sitting with consequences. He issued a public apology to Chris Rock, calling his behavior unacceptable and inexcusable. The words were direct, stripped of performance. "Violence in all of its forms is poisonous and destructive," he wrote. For someone whose career had often been built on confidence, this was an act of vulnerability. He did not attempt to justify the slap as righteous. He acknowledged embarrassment. He acknowledged hurt. He acknowledged hurt. He acknowledged failure. Resigning from the Academy was not merely a symbolic act. It was an admission that something had fractured. When the 10-year ban was announced, it marked an unprecedented disciplinary action for someone at the peak of his success. 10 years is not a short chapter in Hollywood. Careers rise and fall in half that time, but instead of publicly fighting the decision, he accepted it. Acceptance, for someone who had spent a lifetime trying to control perception, was transformative. Professionally, the pause was immediate. Projects were postponed. Studios reassessed risk. For the first time since his early 20s, Will Smith was not racing toward the next release date. He was still one of the most recognizable entertainers alive, but momentum had slowed. In that stillness, deeper introspection began. He traveled quietly, reportedly spending time in India engaging in spiritual practices. Whether through meditation, therapy, or personal retreat, he began confronting the emotional architecture that had shaped his life. In later interviews and video messages, he spoke about understanding that the slap was not about a joke. It was about unresolved fear. It was about decades of internal pressure. It was about the need to protect, amplified by history. One of the most significant admissions he made during this period was recognizing how much of his identity had been built around external validation. Applause had become currency. Box office numbers had become proof of worth. Being the nice guy had become armor. But when that armor cracked, he realized he did not fully know who he was without it. The journey toward redemption is rarely dramatic. It is slow. It requires humility. It requires listening more than speaking. For months, he stayed relatively quiet. He did not flood interviews attempting to reshape the narrative. Instead, he allowed time to pass. That restraint itself was unfamiliar territory for a man accustomed to strategic visibility. When he eventually released a video addressing the incident more personally, his tone was measured. He apologized directly to Chris Rock and to Rock's family. He acknowledged the impact of his actions beyond himself. There was no polished charm in the message, only reflection. Whether critics accepted it or not, the tone suggested someone grappling sincerely with consequence. Meanwhile, conversations about mental health, trauma, and emotional regulation began surfacing in broader cultural discussions. Psychologists and commentators pointed out how childhood experiences can resurface unexpectedly in adulthood, how unresolved trauma can disguise itself as strength, how fame can amplify internal struggles rather than resolve them. In some ways, his public fall became a lens for examining masculinity and vulnerability in high-profile figures. But redemption in the public eye is unpredictable. Some audiences forgive quickly. Others hold tightly to grievance. Will Smith's legacy had entered a new phase, one where brilliance and mistake coexisted visibly. Yet what remained undeniable was the scope of his influence. Decades of music and film could not simply be erased. Gradually, professional life resumed. His film Emancipation, directed by Antoine Fuqua, was released later in 2022. The role demanded physical endurance and emotional gravity, portraying an enslaved man fighting for freedom during the American Civil War. The subject matter was intense, rooted in survival and resilience. The release was overshadowed by lingering controversy, but his performance reminded audiences of his depth as an actor. As months turned into years, the narrative around him softened slightly. Not because the incident was forgotten, but because life continued. New headlines emerged. New scandals replaced old ones. Public memory, though powerful, is not static. Privately, however, transformation does not rely on headlines. It relies on self-awareness. In his memoir, Will, published shortly before the Oscars incident, he had already begun revealing insecurities he had hidden for years. He wrote candidly about fear of cowardice rooted in childhood trauma. He described pushing himself to extremes to prove he was not weak. After the slap, those reflections felt prophetic. The road toward redemption is not about erasing mistakes. It is about integrating them into a broader understanding of self. For Will Smith, that meant accepting that he could be both inspiring and flawed, both accomplished and imperfect, both strong and vulnerable. In the years following the incident, he continued appearing publicly with quieter humility. The effortless swagger that once defined him seemed more tempered. Interviews carried reflection rather than bravado. There was a sense of recalibration, a man learning that strength can exist without domination, that protection does not require aggression, that love can be expressed without performance. Willard Carroll Smith, Jr., born in 1968 in Philadelphia, remains alive, continues working in the United States, and remains one of the most commercially successful actors in modern history. He has not passed away. His story is not one concluded by death, but one evolving in real time, and perhaps that makes it more compelling. Because redemption is not a single speech, it is not a single apology. It is a process measured over years. And as his journey continues, the question shifts from what happened on one night in 2022 to something deeper. Who is he becoming after it? When history eventually settles into perspective, it rarely allows a single moment to define an entire lifetime. The headlines may freeze on controversy, but legacy stretches far wider than scandal. And when the story of Willard Carroll Smith, Jr. is told decades from now, it will not begin or end with one night at the Oscars. It will encompass an era, an influence, a transformation of entertainment itself. To understand his cultural impact, we must return to the late 1980s and early 1990s, when hip-hop was still fighting for legitimacy in mainstream America. Will Smith, as the Fresh Prince, offered a version of rap that could enter suburban living rooms without fear. His storytelling style softened resistance to the genre. He proved that hip-hop could be humorous, narrative-driven, and commercially viable without abandoning authenticity. For many young listeners, especially those outside urban centers, he became their first doorway into rap culture. That bridge mattered. It reshaped how record labels viewed the genre and how audiences consumed it. Then came television. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was not merely a sitcom. It was a generational touchstone. It presented a young black protagonist navigating wealth, identity, and belonging in spaces traditionally dominated by whiteness. The show balanced comedy with social commentary, addressing racism, absentee fathers, class differences, and cultural pride. For countless viewers, particularly black audiences in America and abroad, it offered representation that was vibrant and multidimensional. Will Smith was not a side character or stereotype. He was the center. He was flawed, funny, emotional, ambitious. As he transitioned into film, he carried that representation into global cinema. In the mid-1990s, leading roles for black actors in major blockbuster franchises were still limited. Yet Smith became the face of some of the highest-grossing films in history. Independence Day shattered box office records worldwide. Men in Black redefined science fiction comedy. Bad Boys created a long-running franchise built on chemistry and charisma. He was not cast as a supporting presence. He was the hero saving the world. This visibility mattered internationally. In countries far removed from Philadelphia, audiences knew his name. In Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America, he became synonymous with Hollywood spectacle. His appeal transcended cultural barriers because it was rooted in universal traits: humor, confidence, emotional accessibility. He possessed a rare balance of relatability and star power. Beyond performance, his influence extended into production. Through Overbrook Entertainment, he and his partners developed films and television projects that amplified diverse voices. He produced projects that expanded opportunities for actors and filmmakers of color. He invested in stories that might not have been financed otherwise. His presence behind the camera shaped narratives beyond his own roles. Then there is the intangible quality of optimism he carried for decades. During interviews, he radiated belief in possibility. He spoke about discipline, mindset, and the power of positive thinking. For many aspiring artists, entrepreneurs, and dreamers, his journey from West Philadelphia to global stardom became a blueprint of ambition. He often described studying success as if it were a formula, suggesting that excellence could be engineered through focus and relentless work ethic. His family, too, became cultural figures in their own right. Jaden and Willow Smith carved unconventional artistic paths, challenging traditional expectations of celebrity children. Their fearlessness and self-expression reflected a parenting philosophy centered on independence. Whether praised or criticized, the Smith family influenced conversations about creativity, individuality, and generational change. And yet, legacy is complex. It does not exist in a vacuum free from error. The Oscar incident altered how some perceive his impact. For some, it introduced contradiction into an otherwise inspiring narrative. For others, it humanized him, stripping away the illusion of flawless celebrity. In a way, that contradiction may deepen the conversation around his legacy rather than diminish it. It forces audiences to confront the duality of public figures capable of greatness and misjudgment simultaneously. Consider the arc of his career. A Grammy-winning rapper before age 25,